Back in 1991, CNN made television news history with its coverage of the first Gulf War. The satellite age had arrived and it transformed television news. It took live coverage into the heart of a conflict and could devote 24 hours a day to it. All of a sudden, the idea of a scheduled news broadcast at 6 or 10 p.m. seemed outdated. Fast forward 2 decades and the satellite age has given way to the digital one. News junkies can now use social media and their mobile phones to feed their addictions instantly, faster, and sometimes better than any TV news channel can. And the 24-hour format does have its flaws. There's too much opinion, not enough journalism, more talk than news gathering. Still, there are more news channels than ever as governments from Beijing to Moscow to Paris all realize that those channels can provide them with a soft power push. The Listening Post's Marcela Pizarro now on where the 24-hour TV news business finds itself today.
The 24-hour news business depends on a fundamental premise, that news is always happening, that it's frequently breaking. But every once in a while, a story comes along that exposes that as a fallacy.
A Boeing 777 is missing. They lost contact. Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 with
2 weeks of excruciating airtime to fill.
Press conference after press conference, but the information coming out is slow and scarce.
It's very scarce indeed.
Any further news?
No, there are very confused scenes here.
In the absence of facts, one channel went whole hog and brought in a psychic.
Well, naturally, I don't actually have hard concrete evidence, and I think any psychic who has hard concrete evidence can't do their job correctly because they get misinformed, they get interpreted, and they'll just work on what they know. So I tend to work off what I don't know.
It wasn't the highest point in what was once the iconic news innovation of the late 20th century. 24-hour TV news came of age during the first Gulf War in 1991. CNN provided live coverage around the clock. Its impact on the news industry was dubbed the CNN effect.
With CNN out of Atlanta in the United States, but then very quickly more and more global channels followed. Suddenly news could be on air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that meant there was no longer a daily news cycle that you had to sit down at a set time of day to find out what had happened. Suddenly news could be there day in, day out at any time of the day or night.
It's clear that when there's a big event, 24/7 News owns it, whether it's a war or a Katrina or the Tahrir Square protest. If there's a massive event, everybody goes to 24/7 News. So that's not their problem. Their problem is what do they do in between the big events. And the problem is, in between the big events, on the whole, they don't have anything to say that's relevant to enough people's lives. That's the problem.
So you want to tell me that all of this will vanish in a few years' time? I don't think so. Television as structured news bulletin, work of journalists, actually confirming of news, vetting of what is accurate or not, setting priorities and news agenda, making sense of the world, putting context together in one structured program will stay. You might receive it online. You might have a device at home which has television but has other things as well. But 24 hours news will continue for sure.
Those sounding the death knell for 24-hour TV news say it's been technologically outpaced by the internet, journalistically outmoded by citizen journalism, economically outdated by social media industries.
Social media has revolutionized how the public engage with news and information around the world. They can access it very quickly, it's very democratic, they can express their own opinions, they can share information between themselves, and if you like, get around the kind of media organizations that have traditionally been gatekeepers for news and information. That's why social media is so revolutionary, just as in their time 24-hour news channels were revolutionary.
The speed was the most important merit the 24-hour news channels had, but now it is really outpowered by the new media, and this media is very personalized. That gives the potential for the rise of the citizen journalism. They are equipped with the digital media and mobile communication technologies, so they can actually get engaged with the event very, very easily, and then they can upload, disseminate, and send it globally.
Twitter and Facebook are indicators of news that's happening. Now, what people use really, they go to Twitter and they know that there is, for example, a coup d'etat somewhere. What is the next thing they do? They go to a website that they know, either television or radio or a newspaper, which is structured, organizational, to make sense of what's happening.
But when there's nothing happening, when news is not, quote-unquote, breaking, that's when the cracks in the 24/7 news format really begin to show.
Well, plenty more to come from here, of course. None of it news.
Last July, reporters from around the world camped outside a London hospital.
It's game on. This is the moment that everyone's been waiting for.
They were awaiting the birth of a royal baby.
And behind me, the most watched doors in the world.
One BBC reporter decided to tell it like it is.
But until then, we're going to be speculating about this royal birth with no facts to hand at the moment.
The only thing worse than speculation about a light and frothy news story is speculation about a serious one, like the Boston Marathon bombings.
I'm told I want to be very careful about this because people get very sensitive when you say these things. I was told by one of these sources, who was a law enforcement official, that this was a dark-skinned male.
Trapped on air with few facts to hand, CNN's reporters broke a cardinal rule of live news. Never mind the race to be first, just make sure you get it right. Then there was that jarring moment on American cable channel MSNBC. A congresswoman speaking about the NSA surveillance program was cut off mid-sentence for news that just couldn't wait.
Not continuing
Congresswoman Harman, let me interrupt you. Congresswoman, let me interrupt you just for a moment. We've got some breaking news out of Miami. Stand by, if you will. Right now in Miami, Justin Bieber has been arrested on a number of charges. The judge is reading the charges.
Despite those kinds of shortcomings and competition on the web, the 24-hour TV news business remains a growth industry. Over the past decade, there have been a slew of new state-sponsored global channels. There's this one, funded by Qatar. There's France 24, which was launched when Jacques Chirac was president. Russia's Kremlin-backed RT, China's CCTV, and the BBC, who launched satellite channels in Arabic and Farsi with funding from the British Foreign Office.
CCTV recently increased the investment on these 24-hour news channels.
Over the next hour, we will introduce you to China's new leader, Xi Jinping.
So the way Chinese government would like to expand their soft power to create this public opinion and improve the Chinese images through those the channels, and they can control this media outlet. They have increased the censorship of social media, but at the same time, they increase the power of the mass media.
Why would any country spend so much money on a network if it wasn't an extension of their national interests? Al Jazeera is, at its heart, an extension of Qatari foreign policy. That's the same, as they say, for Russia. It would be the same for Telesur, for Venezuela, and CNN Spanish. If you want to have influence, you got to be on TV.
Because despite the flaws inherent to the format, the falling ratings and all that fast-paced competition online, people still turn to 24-hour TV news. And they watch, even stories like this one.